Thanks for rejoining. So the next period will be, I'll be talking about models for just over an hour, different models that you can have, and also some of the strengths and the limitations of each. They've each got strengths and limitations, and depending on what your own preferences are, that will help you determine which model you like. Out of the models I'll show too, there's many other models, versions of those models, but these are the basic ones, and then we can play around with them as best we can. There's a point, I think it might have been Albina might have made the point, it was one of the presentations. I was thinking later, it might have been you, Rima. What I was thinking about saying, or it might have even been Lorena, that of course, as you implement whatever you decide, you can do it over several years. You can phase it in. So you might start with something that's quite close to what you've got now and then transition. So, it doesn't mean it has to be a dramatic change from one year to the next. As you change your model, you can implement it in phases to help both the community and schools to make the changes. So that's always an important consideration. I'm going to share my screen now and take you through the presentation on models, and I'll talk to that. Let's see, here we go. And sorry, I'll get to it soon. This is all the work we've done so far. And okay, so what I've structured here, what are the models of secondary education we might consider? So we can look at senior secondary over 2 years, or look at it in terms of it's a preliminary year and a final year. So in other words, separating grade 11 and 12, doing a different kind of program in each. So if we approach senior secondary over 2 years and look at it as all mandatory courses, that's one model. There are no electives. You can have levels or you can have single courses. So in other words, no choice for students. Or you could have a model. I'm going to go through each of these separately, by the way. A core of mandatory subjects, and then either in levels or single course structures, and what I call a balanced or elective choice. That's where students, must take an arts, they must take a humanities, they must take a science course, they must take something from technology or health, physical education, for example. And then there's the core plus levels, either levels or single courses, and a specialised pathway. So what that model means is you do maybe national language, you do mathematics, but then you might follow an arts stream. You want to specialise in the arts, or you might want to specialise in STEM. So you do the national language, you do a maths course, you might do 3 maths courses, 3 different kinds of maths courses, or maths courses and science and technology courses. So you have a kind of STEM specialisation, or you could have an arts specialisation, or you might have a humanities specialisation. And then there's a core model again, but it's open choice. So, you can specialise, you can choose across the different areas. You can have, subjects chosen from one area, but not other areas. So it's really open elective choices. And then you can have a model that's just no core at all. I didn't get a sense from the reporting back that anyone liked that idea, that you all seem to like the idea of having at least some core, some mandatory, but some may not. Some may like the idea of just open choice for students. So they don't do national language at all, or they don't do mathematics at all. I'm not aware of a country that's got that open choice. Then there's a model where you see grade 11 as a preliminary. So there's a core, then there's a suite of 5 or 6 courses, and then to a slightly reduced number of courses in grade 12. So you might go from 8 courses, in other words, in total, down to 5 or 6 in grade 12. Or you might have a model where you've got core mandatory subject areas, and then a mix of short and extended courses, leading to a reduced number of courses for grade 12. So in other words, it's almost like a taster. Students do a bit of this, a bit of that, all different kinds of courses in year 11. Then for year 12, they just settle on a few that they really like and that they're very good at. So you're really applying a model of find out what you like and what you're good at in year 11. And then in year 12, that's where you put all your effort and energy. You're doing less, but you're doing it deeper. And of course, there are any other model. So in other words, there's all these different mixes and methods that you can apply. And we're going to look at each of these for their strengths and their weaknesses, limitations. And then we'll have a workshop afterwards where you get the chance to talk about which one you really like the idea of, which ones you think have got merit. So over 2 years, all mandatory. This is simple to administer. Very easy. Everybody does every subject. From the administrator's point of view, you know how many teachers you need in every school, and you can just manage that well. There's very few teacher workforce management issues. Maybe if you get an oversupply from the universities in some areas, you need to make it clear that they're not going to be employed, and where you've got some gaps, but largely you don't have many workforce management issues because every school has a certain number of teachers in a certain number of areas. The limitations of this model is that it favours adults over students. So in other words, it doesn't take into account subjects that students don't enjoy or they're not good at. They have to do it. It's likely to lead to poor attention issues, poor attendance, and behaviour. I gave you the example of Brazil. As students who have to attend courses and do subjects that they've been learning since, their early years of school. They don't want to do it anymore. They want to do the ones they're very interested in. They know what they want to do, what they're good at. And so you get these issues. So it seems equitable. Everybody does the same, but the outcomes won't be equitable. They'll be inequitable because you'll have a good number of students that actually won't be achieving. They'll be unhappy, disengaged, and if they're attending, if they're made to attend, they will, but they're not really engaged with the learning at all. So you don't really get an equitable outcome. It looks equitable, but it's not. Okay, here a model where you've got core and mandatory, core mandatory courses, and then you've got balanced elective choices. So that is it's simple to administer because you know that every student has to take a humanities course, every student has to take an arts course. You're not telling them exactly which one they have to take, but you know that in every school there has to be a faculty of teachers to teach the arts, to teach languages, to teach physical education, health, information technology, and so on. So there's few teacher workforce management issues there. The notion of a well-rounded student. So you can say every child leaves with having right till the end of year 12, the arts, humanities. They've done a subject area in every of those fields, those disciplines. Again, it forces students to undertake learning in areas they dislike or they don't perform well. So, you know, the student that loves science and technology and wants to specialize in those areas, they still have to do an arts subject. They still have to do a humanities subject, and they may not enjoy that. That's not where their passion is. That's not where their interest is, but they're made to do it. It gives them a sense of choice, students a sense of choice, but it's limited sense. They can choose, but it's within certain requirements. And it limits the capacity of the schooling system to develop students with strong capability in priority areas. So you might, for example, in your country want a whole lot of STEM capable, very good STEM capable students. You'd want to drive those students with that capability, give them as many STEM courses to do as they want to do. Or if you really want, you really feel the arts needs a boost in your country, then you want to give students that opportunity to specialize rather than have to do a mix of subjects. Okay, so here's the specialised pathway, and that means that the benefits are it enables students to develop strength in learning areas they are good and interested in. So children go to school in year 11 and 12 as young adults. If they have a passion for the arts, they're able to do, apart from their core mandatory subjects, a number of arts subjects, and they, therefore they're very engaged in their schooling. If it's STEM related, students with a love of STEM, they're allowed to do a whole mix of STEM subject areas. And so they're happy and engaged too. So students aren't all doing the same subjects, but they're all engaged and really they're doing subjects they're good at and that they're interested in. It enables links to be made by teachers and students to future career pathways. So those teachers working in the arts can really have a group of students that they can engage with the different arts industry outside of school and have those students having close networks with those arts agencies and industries, or if it's STEM, or if it's in the health physical education area, they can link them up with a whole range of groups. Students are likely to maintain engagement in class, so they love what they're learning. They've been able to choose the subjects they love and are good at. And so it's more likely that they're going to be very engaged in their learning. Limitations. It means if a student, for example, in grade 11 makes the decision that they are interested in the arts, what can possibly happen in some models is they get locked into that, and they might find by the end of year 11, actually, that wasn't what they were interested in. They thought that's what they would be interested in, but they now would like to do something else. It may be too hard to change over. It may, particularly if it's a year, grade 11 and 12 is seen as a 2-year preparation. It might be difficult to change from one specialization to another. And so, it can lock a student in if they haven't chosen well at the beginning of grade 11. There are teacher workforce management challenges for the schooling system and the schools. If no children want to do the arts areas, then what do you do with your arts teachers that are there to teach grades 11 and 12? They've got no students. So you have to either, they have to find another school, go where there are lots of students wanting arts. So therefore, the movement of teachers becomes a factor. And of course, it means maybe retraining and redeployment of teachers. If there are certain courses that students aren't interested in or taking up, then you have to retrain the teachers to teach in other areas. Okay, so it's, there are benefits here for the students, but the system has to actually change and adapt to support that. Okay, here's where it's just open elective choice. It enables students to explore a range of courses that they could specialize in one or more or general. It's open to them. So some students will be doing their mandatory subjects plus maybe only the arts or maybe only the humanities. Another student might do humanities, mix of humanities and STEM courses. Another student might do a whole mix of different things. So in other words, there's no model. You can specialize or not. It's up to you. It gives students a greater sense of agency. They can decide what kind of model plan that they want for their own learning program. And they're likely to maintain engagement in class because they've mapped out the program of learning for themselves. The teacher workforce management challenges here are that some areas, again, that would be unpopular. So like the previous model, from school to school, it may differ. There may be some learning areas where students just don't choose. And so you might need more staff in some areas and less in others in terms of their subject expertise. It raises the potential for competition between learning areas. The teachers have to sell their subject. So, at the end of grade 10, there's a lot of engagement and encouragement for students to take up their subject in grade 11, their courses in grade 11. So they're kind of promoting themselves to engage students. It puts some pressure on them to make sure that they make their learning in grade 10, grade 9, grade 10 far more engaging and interesting. So students want to continue with those subjects into grade 11. Here's the non-core. So this is really where students are in control of their learning totally. No mandatory courses, so they do whatever they wish. Their engagement is likely to be strong because they don't have to do mandatory subjects. In all the other previous models, if a student's not very good at mathematics, they still have to do it. But in this model, they don't have to do mathematics. So, they're very happy. The country might be losing something because the student has dropped mathematics, but the students are engaged and happy. The limitations, it assumes that all that a student needs for later learning has been acquired at year 10. So it really means you have to be confident that at the end of year 10, student has everything they need for life and work, whichever pathway they take, they've acquired that by year 10, all those fundamentals. There's nothing additional to be acquired in grade 12, 11 and 12 that's essential for life and work, later work, because students just may not choose that subject. There are many teacher workforce management issues. So whereas mathematics teachers have always, with the other models, always going to have a job, there may be less maths teachers needed and science teachers, and really the balance becomes depending on whether students choose those subjects or not. There's a public perception issue that traditional mandatory areas are devalued, and therefore, issues could emerge. Business might say that students are, leaving school without all the skills they need in mathematics or science or in language. So there's a public perception issue. Grade 11 and 12 is just free for students and with no requirements. So the nation's influence on workforce planning is significantly reduced. So if you in Lithuania decide you've got a problem in a certain industry and you need graduates from grade 12 into university or into training colleges, vocational training colleges in particular areas, you've got no control over that. It's students that have the control. You can't control what subjects they do and what they don't. Okay, so that's the kind of 2-year model with all the different examples. Here's another way of looking at it, another way of looking over those 2 years. Grade 11 is seen as a preliminary year. So after you finish basic education in grade 10, you then enter grade 11, and it's known as a preliminary year. This is a year where you prepare yourself for the final year, what was called grade 12. So in the preliminary year, you do a suite of courses of mandatory, and they might be balanced out. So you're doing a whole range of different areas, 5 or 6 or 7 courses plus the core, and then you reduce that down to the core plus, maybe 4 courses, and you choose those according to your ability and interest. So in other words, you start wide and you come to narrow it according to what you're good at. You're not continuing with courses that aren't going to help you in your final exams. You're only continuing with those courses you're good at and you enjoy doing. So the benefits are grade 11 is seen as a preparation for determining future study or career, exploring different options. It ensures that the mandatory courses are followed through as you transition from grade 10, and enables students to focus on a reduced suite of subject areas. So it gives them really a good look at what's possible and then deciding on, for year 12, what they will concentrate on. The limitations, it does have an impact in some schools if students do not select courses from a learning area. So you can kind of guarantee a mix in grade 11, but in grade 12, If they all start dropping the same subjects, not continuing with the same subjects in grade 12, then that will have a staffing reduction for you. Okay, and the final model is where you have a mix of short and extended courses. Again, grade 11 is preliminary, a real suite, a whole smorgasbord where you can pick and choose short courses, you know, for maybe 5 weeks, or extended ones that might last for the whole year.
Bet čia žiūrėk, čia 2,5, tai čia grade gear.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm sorry, you please continue, Phil, okay?
Oh, okay, sure. So grade 11 is seen as a preparation for determining study career. It ensures the mandatory courses are followed through, and students can follow the courses they perform best in and like in greater depth. So it really, again, it's giving students a real taste for what will happen as they move into grade 12, which of course is also similar to what will happen as they move after school, making subject choices if they're in university or if they're in a training college. The teacher workforce management challenges for school systems, it's lots of here competition between learning areas and courses to retain students in grade 12. So lots of things offered in grade 11, but that then becomes reduced in grade 12. And so really balancing the teaching staff and what's offered is a real challenge. Okay, so they're the models. I mean, there's others, of course, that could be a whole mix of any of those, and it's just really up to you to really determine which of those you'd prefer. Irina, might open that up for discussion here. I've got a question. How do they correlate with school size and the number of pupils? Yes, good question from Deva, is it? Deva, yes, the bigger the school, the more courses you can offer, the more staff you have. Usually schools are staffed according to numbers, the number of teachers based on the number of students. Unless you could have a model that really gives school. There are some countries where the principal is given a budget and they determine how they use that budget for staffing, so they can employ a whole lot of short-term part-time teachers, or they can employ permanent teachers, so they can decide what mix of courses and what that means, what number of staff. When they recruit a teacher, they might recruit a teacher that can teach 3 or 4 different courses, subject areas. So the question is, it really depends on the policy that's used in the school about how staffing is determined. The more flexibility you provide for students to make choice, that means that the system has to manage it carefully and arrange for the movement of teachers. If a school there's a tendency for students not to, too many students to take arts subjects, then arts teachers that are in a school might have to move to a school where there's a lot of interest. And of course, in some systems, they have specialist schools, like they might have a specialist arts school or a specialist sports senior college. And so then And again, that's one of those systems that allow choice or some level of selectivity of students. Okay, so Linus, Irina, I'm happy to answer questions again. Open it up for any number of questions.
Let's ask our colleagues, do you have some questions? Irina, as usually have questions?
I always have a lot of questions. Yeah. In your slides, you have, in the last model you showed, there was, in the preliminary 11th grade, I mean, there was a core, in 12th grade, minimal core. So what do you mean? So the core is not the same in year 11 and year 12?
Yeah. Sorry, yes. So in other words, every student, it's a transition from grade 10 to 11. So every student in grade 11 must do national language and mathematics, but when they go into grade 12, you might say they only have to do national language. They can drop mathematics. They don't have to do a maths. So it's the core is reduced, or it might be, you know, they must do national language, maths and science, a science subject. When they go into year 12, they don't have to do a science anymore.
And,
or you might give, sorry, go on.
And what are the examples of core in other countries? Because well, we have rather wide core, but we, well, actually our current model is something similar to what you have explained, to balance model, I guess, where they have to select, they have an opportunity to select from certain areas, but they must to select in certain areas. Like yes. For in sciences, they can choose either physics or biology, or, and in every area they have to do the same. So we have rather wide selection of subject that they have to do in secondary education. And how about the other countries? What are the examples of the core in other successful countries?
Well, national language and mathematics are almost universally the core. Science isn't in all countries, but it is in some. So, and as I said, there are some countries where everything is core, everything is mandatory, but I'm yet to find a country that doesn't have its national language as the mandatory, and most have mathematics as the second mandatory. Some don't have mathematics, but most do, and some have science. After that, it varies, and as you know, some have the balanced where you have to do either history or geography or economics in a humanities area. Few force students to do an arts, have an arts selection. Usually when they have a balance, it's the groupings are fairly big. Humanities, they might include the arts within humanities, for example.
But is core always the same for all the students, or core may be differentiated? I mean, in terms of difficulty?
No. So that usually, well, in some, it's a single course, a single national language, single maths, and single science, general science. In other countries, it's there's a general language course, and then a national language course, and then an advanced course, or an intermediate course. Maths generally most countries have it differentiated because, you know, even some countries start that differentiation in earlier, you know, have that in grade, you know, 7, 8, 9, different levels, whereas they may not in other subject areas. But maths does tend to really separate learners into groupings very early. Science, the tendency there is, although some countries have a general science course, most have biology, physics, chemistry. There are other courses like earth sciences, usually this should, I don't mean this rudely in any way, but if a child has to do science, usually they direct students into biology because the mathematical demands in physics and chemistry are much greater than in biology. And so there's a tendency for students, if they have to do a science course and there's not a general science course, they'll offer biology, and students will be required to do, well, they either are required to do that or they choose to do that because it's going to be not as challenging for them as chemistry or physics.
Mm-hmm. And just to finish the sciences question, the topic on sciences, how often in upper secondary integrated science course is offered to students? Is it a case or it's usually in lower levels when integrated sciences are offered to students?
Yes. Most countries tend to keep science as general up to year 10. Some don't. Some do include in year, they use year 7 and 8 as the kind of beginnings into secondary education, and then students elect in year 9 and 10 if they want to do biology or chemistry or physics, or a mix of those. And then definitely in year 11 and 12, they usually have biology, chemistry and physics, sometimes earth sciences and astrology sometimes in some countries, and astronomy, sorry. So yes, but they might offer a general course if they find they've got large numbers of students continuing on for year 11 and 12 who aren't capable of, you know, the more challenging aspects of the sciences. They may develop a general science course for them. There's a question here about computer science. Mm-hmm. So I'll just read this question. What about computer science, computing or digital technologies? Is something for everybody or only optional? Okay. There's two approaches here, of course, that happen before the senior years, is whether ICT, computer study, is a separate subject or whether it's integrated into every subject area, and then there's a separate course in addition to that. In most countries, students aren't required to do a digital technology course in year 11 and 12. You know, it may be the case in the future that, you know, countries that maybe want to initiate a very strong STEM focus may require students to. I'm not aware of that, of that happening in countries. I'm still, it still seems to be the case that most countries offer a digital technologies or a design technology course as an option rather than mandatory.
Okay.
I have some questions from my colleagues, and I'll translate for them.
Sure.
How about assessment?
Yes.
Is this the case that students who do in grade to 12 certain amount of subject, they usually kind of evaluated through examination? Well, the examination is are taken from all the subjects, I mean, that are studied in grade 12, or is it optional for them to choose how many exams to do?
In most cases, the way it operates, so assessment usually happens in grade 11 at a point in time when the student's going to decide what happens in year 12. And of course, it depends on the model. And that will usually, in most countries now, there's formative assessment done, which contributes to if you like, a mark at the end, or a grading at the end of grade 11. That helps the student to decide what they will do in grade 12, unless they're all made to continue on the same course. Generally, then, the grade 11 course doesn't really have a major, it doesn't contribute greatly. It's the final mark in year 12. So year 11 is seen as a preparation, practice almost for year 12, and then year 12 is when you do all the assessments are what we call high stakes. High stakes meaning when you're having an assessment task in class, if that contributes, or if there are external examinations, they're high stakes because they eventually determine your final, after 13 years of schooling or so, that's your final grading or mark. That's your qualification. So it's high stakes. Year 12 is high stakes, any of the assessment. But it depends, Irina, whether grade 11 is seen as where you make decisions about what you do in grade 12, depending on your performance in grade 11, or it's really just a preparation, and then grade 12 is really that then becomes solely the time when your assessments contribute to your final mark. Do you need to translate that or no?
Okay.
The other thing I didn't say is there are some cases where year 11, grade 11, really only, depending on when the assessment happens or what time your assessment is done at the end of year 12 and how that's done, there are models where, an alternative here where grade 11 really only lasts for typically 3/4 of the year or 2/3 of the year. And actually the final third of the year, you actually enter year 12. So in other words, it's not a full year, it's a preparation. So that's another way to think of it, that it doesn't have to be a full year of study. It could be a partial, grade 11 is part of a year. And that helps you in a preliminary way decide. And so grade 12 is taken over a longer period. And that all, of course, depends on when the assessments are done and what that means in terms of entry into university or training or work.
Okay, let's, maybe it is more question, is it? Maybe maybe we start with our proceed on work groups, and we will have time to more discuss after group works.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's probably going to be, it seemed like the reporting back people wanted to talk a bit more and we had to cut that off. So what I'll do is I'll get on screen the worksheet, the work task, just check here. I'll just get this on screen. Can you see my screen now? Yeah? Great. Okay, so we thought maybe just to start the discussion, we'd ask people in their groups, what's not working well in terms of your current model? If you're thinking about other models, then there's an assumption that something's not quite working right at the moment. So we want to give you time to discuss that. Of course, you might want to say what's working well, what you don't want to lose if you construct another model. And then on the worksheet, which of those models that I outlined do you prefer? And what are the implications? So in other words, you go for one of these choices, then what's it going to mean? Do you need to think about? What needs to be taken into consideration? And again, it goes back to those trends that we discussed earlier. Which of those match here? Which of the things that you were talking about that you like the sound of them, which of these models actually aligns with that? So you want children to have greater choice. How much choice? Do you want it to be a balanced choice, or do you want them to specialize? You've still got some degree of hold on them having mandatory courses, but then you could reduce the number of mandatory courses for grade 12. So in other words, you're not totally losing that, but you're opening up more agency for the child as they move from year 11 into year 12. So there are implications with all of these, and it'd be good for you to talk firstly in your groups what's not working well in the current model, what models you prefer, and then what are the implications. And by the way, be creative. If you think there's another model that I haven't presented that you'd like to suggest, please do. And of course, in the trends, I talked about vocational education. Can I just check, Vinus, in your current system, can a student, if they go to their local high school, can they do vocational courses in that high school as well as academic courses, or are they separate?
Yes,
schools?
They can do.
Okay. So what's the mix of those, and how much do you want students to have those choices as well as part of this? Okay, so when we come back.
Yes, I think we will have now 10 to 2, so 5 minutes break, and 5 to, I think approximately, if you will come back 2:30, it will be fine.
You mean that if we, I'm sorry for interrupting, you mean we are coming back at 2:05?
Pusę 3 tada grįžtumėm, ar ne?
Oh, okay.
Dabar 5 minutės pertrauka.
Po diskusijos, Irena, po diskusijos.
Okay, we have 5 minutes now break, and then straight to the groups until 2:30. Yeah. 2:30. Yeah, okay.
Not 2:30.
2:30, sorry.
That's 2.
That's 2. And then when we come back again, we'll have people reporting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, I just encourage you to enjoy the break, of course. When you come back, you'll be in that workshop group and really think through you know, what would be a model that you'd really like? And again, for the groups, you don't have to come up with an agreed decision. It's just important you report on what was the discussion, how the discussion went, and that might be a range of different views.
Okay, so Agle will put us in different group, and we will have now 5 minutes break.
Great. I'll see you back at 2:30.
Yeah.
Some models that I guess you could say are innovative. There are a few countries that go, you know, in a very innovative way, because countries are still very much overseen in a conservative way around that pathway from school to university. And so there's still a lot of, because it's all high stakes, there's a lot of reluctance to experiment too much with those final years. But I can guarantee what I will show you are some different models in different countries and provinces or states that will give you an indication of different ways of thinking. Okay?
Yeah.
Maybe let's start with time from end. Maybe we ask group number 6 at first.
Okay, so this time it's me, and I will invite my colleagues to complement, to add something to what I will be talking. So we were talking about our current model, which is core plus balanced option, which is something we have now, and we think we do not need to introduce more changes into this model at the moment currently. But our discussion focused on what doesn't work in this current model and what we have to change in order to make it efficient. So this means we have to rethink certain subjects in the core as compulsory, and maybe to move them to the optional ones, to that other side, leaving the core a little bit the more option, less loaded, or it's because now it's very wide, and we have to reduce it a little bit. And we also, so my colleagues will say about the subject that we were talking about. And as to that difference in grade 11 and grade 12, we think that we do not have to differentiate. And because if we introduce some options for students, so it makes no sense just to, you know, because the time is too short to let them try certain subjects. It's better to choose several ones and to continue until the very end. And in general, we prefer, we give priority to international baccalaureate model, which favors the kind of equal basis for all subjects, because now we have a number of lessons designated to certain subjects, which has no clear kind of explanation why we give 4 lessons for math and 6 lessons for Lithuanian, for example. What is the reason behind that? What is the logic behind that? And we think we have to introduce kind of same amount of lessons for for all the subjects. So that was how it works in international baccalaureate. But I invite some people who were with me in my group to add some ideas. So
I can add some ideas that we talked that some subjects doesn't work now in Lithuania in upper secondary education. Especially we have a huge problem with arts. we have problems with ethical education, and so we talked about physical education also, that it doesn't work all these subjects properly. And again, we can say that equality between subjects also is enough huge. If we are talking about Lithuania, we have especially 5 or 6 lessons. If we're talking about chemistry or physics, sometimes we have 2 or 3 lessons. It's looks not properly for all system, and generally the important for us when we talked about all our subjects, we also touch problem about content of our subject. It's also so very important thing. When we are talking about core, it's maybe it's easier to find like a general agreement, but on the other hand, I want to state that the content of subject is much more challenging thing for Lithuania now, and how to find agreement about content of Lithuanian language, about history content, it's so problematical thing now.
Okay.
There is a view that after year 10, physical education, for example, really only needs to be taken by students that really want to specialize in health physical education, that it's, you know, it's a course that should not be mandatory or not be forced on students.
Okay, let's go to group number 5.
Here we are, and I also ask my colleagues for help if I miss some important aspect of our discussions, because we also started from the main question: does the system of secondary education now, which is in reality works in proper way, and can we achieve the goals of this system, which are documented? And we looked through the statements in the table, and our first idea is that we could choose one or another model only after the answer to the question, what is the aim of secondary education? And then when we have this answer, we could just simplify our choosing model. And the idea, what is the reason to have this answer is based between 2 aspects of discussion. Is secondary education considered as the middle stage between middle stage towards higher education, or secondary education is the final stage, and we have to think that after secondary education we have the matured person. The next one idea which we discussed was the real question about the period of implementing of changes. For example, members of group mentioned that we can offer any free choice to student, and even in contemporary situation, we can offer for student to choose math and arts at the same time. But the reality is that there are differences between regions. There are the order of a state to finish school with mathematics, but not with arts. And if we are making changes in nearest future, for example, 3 or 4 years, we cannot make radical changes in the model, because all the secondary education is related with higher education, and it means that we have to make changes in both sides. And the third one aspect was resources. Do we consider about human resources, about financial aspects of implementing of this change? and whose arguments are the most important. For example, of youth who is still not experienced in life and they are not able to decide what is more important for them. Should we consider interests of higher education, of business, or just experts and politics are able to make decisions themselves? But to summarize, we just think that some kind of decision on expert levels should be provided for students, that they are not able to choose everything as they want, because the state still regulate the aims of secondary education. I'm sorry, I see the face of Irene and it's not very happy. Am I talking about what you want to hear?
we are, I think we need to hear everything, and let's look to all groups, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Lady, it's now on top, I think now it's anyway. Okay, let's group number four.
Hello, from group number 4. And I'm not sure how do I feel now, if I am sad or happy. Sad because I didn't expect that 2 groups before me will say almost everything what we discussed, but happy that our discussions were to the point, you know. So we also discussed that before deciding on the models, trends, or anything else, we have to make serious decisions about the aims of upper secondary education. What do we expect from this level of education? And this decision is the core point to go further. Later on, we talked about the recognition of competences that children bring from non-formal education. That's a very serious point also. And later on, we came to the point that nowadays, our upper secondary education, the content of secondary education is limited by the exams. Our orientation is to prepare for exams, and it makes the content of education less flexible and less relevant. That, but we have the feeling that it will change to the bright side. Also, we thought that too many subjects, too many courses we offer at upper secondary education. It should be reduced. And also, we thought that the time for upper secondary education, 2 years, is not enough. Maybe we should talk about the changes in the structure of our education system, and upper secondary of 3 or 4 years, that would be better. Also, we talked that the choice of children might be limited by the shortage of teachers that are in workplace right now. And sometimes the choice is limited because we do not have enough teachers for some model that children would like to choose. And talking about the models, we agreed that what we have now, core plus elective choice, that would be better. But first of all, we have to decide what is core, to define it very clearly. And later on, we can decide if it should be open elective choices or balanced elective choices. If the members of my group have more ideas that were not said loudly right now, please speak up.
Okay, let's go to group number 3.
Yes, thank you. We are ready. We also agreed that nowadays situations show that we are in the model first and the second line, and also see the troubles and problems, that it's too big a weight on students. It's 8 obligational subjects, and also it is a lack of deep going on curriculum. Also, we should think about the number of these obligatory mandatory subjects. Also that we should think about the requirements of the exams. And it is a good and strong part that we have possibility to suggest students academical and practical choice. And it might be the point which could keep sustainability. And we also discussed about what could be more new. We discussed about the model 2, the first line, and the questions are, is it so good to every student when they study less but more deeper? Also, we see that there is a lack of data-based research in Lithuania, and we feel that it would be so good to develop our ideas on these results. Also, it was a strong agreement that exam program, it shouldn't be separate and must be related with the measurement on deep thinking, creative thinking of students. And also we had a student voice in our group. We are happy that we had straight from the student. Paulus told that he feels that some students, they still are not ready, even at the 11 or 12 grade, understand themselves. And our experts discussed on that career education should empower them in lower classes, as we see good examples in Europe. And also it should be not closed the way for the second chance. Also, experts agree that it should be smooth transition from the grade 10 to 11. And also it was mentioned that very good balanced system is international baccalaureate. So it might be also a good model, and we should think about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Some interesting, there's some similarities and themes coming through here. Of course, the exams across all countries, because the end of year 12 is across the globe is, as I said before, high stakes assessment. It can have an influence, a strong influence, to the point where it determines what the structure and what actually happens in terms of engagement of students. And what it means is you can't change a secondary, senior secondary system without looking at the assessment and what you're going to do about that. One thing to think about, and I'm going to give some thinking, some things to think about between now and when we meet next time. There's another approach you could consider and throw here. It's related to the baccalaureate. Some systems have a project. Students have to do a project. So as apart from the courses they're doing, what's included is an individualized project that they explore, an area of interest that they report on, and that becomes something that is also included in their final examination. It gives them a bit more flexibility. It's like a little research project that you would, but that something similar to what you might start in university to learn about research. So there's a couple of state and country systems that use this project as a part of the senior secondary program that students do. And I really like the question that came from Asta, and I think confirmed by Rima and Loretta, Irina, I think you did touched on this too. It's really about the purpose. And that's going to be homework for you to all think about. What really is the purpose if we're going to, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, you know, coined the term form follows function. So you determine what the function is, what's the purpose, and then you design your structure around that. Of course, then, as others have mentioned, there are lots of factors. I can't remember, one of you mentioned there's going to be funding implications. There are staffing, teaching resource implications. So we don't want to cut off dreaming yet, do we, Irina? We want to dream about what it might look like and not cut out anything. But all these things have to be taken into consideration when you finally determine what your model will be. Sorry, Vinus, I think we're up to number 2. Am I right?
Yeah, number 2, but I am number 2. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but I agree that in all group it was quite similar discussion, and just we found that today we are on second model, core plus balance elective choice, and we had discussion about what we want to achieve, and this discussion was quite interesting. And of course, in last point, we think that question is about our goal, and this question was as well raised from some people. So it's, I think everything is going, and of course it was mentioned about a model of model, how to say, in Lithuanian it's profiliavimas. I don't know, in differentiation, it was some years ago, and in this model we had some mistakes and some problems, and we just check it will be fine with this mistake or this problems not arise in this time. But anyway, we will go forward. Thank you. And now group number 1.
Yes, being the last is not easy to add new ideas. But we discussed all these models, and almost everyone agreed that first and last one, 5th model for Lithuania would be not very suitable. It's not would be not easy to implement in Lithuania, and we think that we should more deeply discuss 2nd, 3rd, and 4th model, and some of us think that this 4th model would be the best reflect needs of our students. And discussing about grade 11 and 12, what the difference could be to have less compulsory subjects, and some of us express idea that 2 years for upper secondary education is very short time, but I think we don't discuss this issue now. Thank you.
Thank you. Loretta, you've got a point you've made there about maturity work. Can you explain that?
It was a reaction on your comment that project work is so good. So we have a prototype, let's say like that. It's equal to exam, and the student may have a possibility to do research, and as a project work, and so great when it's open possibility to choose the problem and topic by himself or herself, and the possibility to get consultation from teachers all over the school and find out the interesting point of his or her interests. And it's very impressive results when students are correctly, how to say, supported in that way. And we started to think that, and this maturity walk was based, the concept also on good practices of international baccalaureate, and getting involved to the holistic approach and so on.
Excellent, excellent. So there you are. They've got a model. Irina, you want to say something?
No, that maybe it sounds in English a little bit unusual, maturity work. It's in Lithuanian, it's direct translation, but it's a project work actually, what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so really some good themes coming through there. And, you know, it seems like you're all mostly interested in having it as a 2-year period rather than separating it into preliminary and final year, but and having a core and having electives, but we're not quite sure yet what those electives would be and what would be the level of flexibility. So we've got plenty of time to look at those. A key theme that came out originally suggested by Asta and confirmed by others is purpose. Let's be clear about the purpose of these 2 years. Is it more of the same from year 10? Is it just doing more? It just an older child doing more of the same? Or is it to be seen as a completely different year at the other end? It's a completely set of 2 years preparation for tertiary education, which might be higher or into training or to work. Is it the purpose is really to, in those 2 years, ensure that the young adult has everything that they need for life and work, all the competencies they need. Is it a period where they are really starting to understand themselves and what it is they're good at and want to do in life beyond school? There's a whole lot of different purposes. Is year 11 and 12 preparation for the country, for the workforce? I mean, there'll be some people that have that view, that it's essentially nation building, a nation building period. Or is it about the young person becoming themselves and being fulfilling their passion and interest in learning as the beginnings of lifelong learning in a very strong way as they make that transition? Is it all about pathways? What are the pathways through 11 and 12 to post-school where they need to go? And of course, what's the role then of assessment? Is it meant to provide all the strengths that this person has? Is it meant to separate and grade students? You know, there's just so many different things you could say are the purposes of these years. So Irina, Rasa, I'm thinking this is homework for everyone to think about what is the purpose. And maybe we start our next session with a good discussion of that and see what individuals come back with, having thought through. Okay, we're just about finished, I think. Is there any final matter, any concern? I can see Rutas, dear colleagues, it was great to go over.
It was idea to open a video from everybody, but to check how we look, and Agle asked to do some photo. And,
bet dar yra pora klausimų.
And
Ar vienas. Pasižiūrėkime Aistės Kairienės.
It's one question more, Aiste Kairienė. You can maybe.
Okay, could you please clarify, most probably, how many core subjects should be in the model where grade 11 and 12 are separated? Is that the, okay. There's no mandatory, there's no, sorry, it's really up to the country to determine that. There's no, the core could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4. It's really flexible. So you can, that when we come back next, we'll be talking about these things, and the third day, what would be your core, and what's the argument for making something a core? Is it just because it's always been, or because it's going to be politically sensitive to not do it, or is this a building on of year 10, you know, that these core are fundamental? So that's when you start to question, is science, does everyone need to do science in year 11 and 12? Science teachers would say yes, but maybe others would not. Okay, so
I think we need to say goodbye till 6th of November.